Hey, this is Nicole Kelly, host of Disarming Disability. Thanks for listening to the following show on Public House Media.
You're listening to Catch Up, an official news production of Public House Media.
Today is June 16th, 2020, and it's time to catch up on the news that you need to know about.
Today we're helping you catch up on politics, sports, and media news, and as always, we'll end on a positive note with your daily dose of good news.
All of this and more coming up soon alongside correspondents John Lauder and Max Walpuff. We're your hosts, Anna Herman
and Dan Kotnick. Welcome to Catch Up. Let's begin with our top news story of the day. A Russian court sentenced former US Marine Paul Whelan to 16 years in prison yesterday on counts of espionage, ending a months-long trial. Whelan has adamantly denied the charges since being detained in December 2018 while visiting Moscow. Whelan's family and legal team have said they believe Whelan was unwittingly handed a flash drive containing, quote, state secrets before a personal trip to Moscow to attend a wedding, and that Whelan has been denied proper medical treatment while in custody.
At his sentencing, Whelan continued to profess his innocence while denouncing what he and his legal team have called a sham trial. Ahead of the sentencing, Whelan and his protective glass box in the courtroom held up a handmade sign that said sham trial, no human rights, and Paul's life matters. He also called on President Donald Trump to end this political charade, saying this is slimy, greasy, grubby Russian politics. Nothing more, nothing less.
Whelan's defense team have also come out saying they believe that the arrest and conviction is part of a plan by the Russian government to use Whelan as leverage with the United States in negotiations for a prisoner swap. The Russian Foreign Ministry have raised the possibility last year of being open to exchanging an unnamed American national for two Russian nationals, Konstantin Yaroshenko, convicted of drug smuggling in 2011, and Viktor Bout, a Russian arms dealer dubbed the, quote, merchant of death, who was sentenced to 25 years in 2012. We're joined now by Catch-Up News correspondent John Lauder to discuss this case more. John, I guess the first question is, what's the next step in the process, or what do we think is the next piece to be moved? Is it now looking at to see what President Trump and the United States do, or is there more from the Russian side of this?
Yeah, I mean, it really seems, Daniel, like it's going to have to be either President Trump or the leaders from Ireland, maybe Prime Minister Trudeau in Canada, Boris Johnson in the UK. Somebody is going to have to step in here and help out this situation because obviously, Whelan believes that he is innocent. So it's definitely a difficult situation. You would think President Trump, considering his relationship with Russia and with Vladimir Putin, he would be the one to step in, especially considering, Mr. Whelan is a former U.S. Marine. You would think that Trump would be the individual, but with Trump, you just never know what to expect. So since this gentleman is an Irish, British, and Canadian citizen as well, there are multiple different governments that could step in here to help him out.
Is there anything that we should be watching for, not to make any sort of inference or anything like that, but with the election in 2016, the story was about Russian interference in the U.S. election. And now in 2020, we come to another meeting where Russia seems to have some kind of leverage over the United States. And so not to say that there will be or that it is in play, but is there a view or an angle to watch for to see how Russia sort of plays this with the terms of leverage that they have against the United States?
I think this is huge in that regard because obviously the election coming up in November is critically important for the direction of the country. Obviously, with all the protests going on, the situation with COVID-19, President Trump is already under a ton of pressure. And now you bring this situation into the fold, especially considering it involves Russia so heavily. It's going to have a huge impact because Mike Pompeo has come out denouncing Russia. The U.S. ambassador to Russia, John Sullivan, called the sentencing a mockery of justice. I have no doubt that Vladimir Putin is not liking those words one bit, and he follows the U.S. government and the U.S. news media very closely. So this, I think, could have a huge impact on where things go in our relationship with Russia, and specifically in Trump's relationship with Russia, and how that could impact things in November.
Well, John, it sounds like a story that we'll have to keep an eye on in the coming months. So thank you for taking the time to talk with us about it.
Guys, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
On Monday, the Supreme Court made their ruling on a case that many in the LGBT community had been watching over for the last few months, as court ruled following Title VII of the 1964 Civil Rights Act that employment discrimination based on sexual orientation or identity is prohibited under federal law. The court voted 6-3 with Justices John Roberts and Neil Gorsuch siding with the 4 liberal judges on the bench.
Prior to the decision, LGBT job discrimination was technically still legal around the majority of the nation. LGBT rights groups call this a significant win. Sarah Katie Ellis, the president and CEO of GLAAD, said the, quote, decision gives us a hope that as a country we can unite for the common good and continue the fight for LGBTQ acceptance. The decision came after 2 gay men and 1 transgender woman were all fired from their jobs and sued their employers for alleging discrimination.
Gerald Bostock was fired from his county job in Georgia after he joined a gay softball team. Donald Zarda was fired after saying to a client that he was 100% gay, and Amy Stevens was fired from her job at a funeral home after telling her employers that she was transgender. The LGBT community is calling this court ruling a huge win for them. While other leagues around the world and the United States are starting to resume league matchups between teams, Major League Baseball and its players have been at a stalemate in their off-the-field contest over how to structure an abbreviated baseball season. In a response to baseball's ownership's latest and, by their words, final proposal for a 72-game season, including salaries at an 80% prorated rate, the MLBPA responded that they would not participate in future discussions, referring back to an agreement between the owners and players in March.
The original agreement between the 2 groups stated that players would agree to a schedule of games as long as players were paid their full salaries, prorated based on the number of games played. Owners have counted recently that the salary negotiations should be revisited to account for the lost revenue of not having fans in attendance at games.
In what looks like the last public statement between the 2 parties on the matter, the MLBPA Executive Director Tony Clark seemed to show the players are now putting the decision on what the 2020 MLB season will look like squarely at the feet of Commissioner Rob Manfred, who has the ultimate decision on the matter. The last line of the statement reads simply, quote, "It's time to get back to work. Tell us when and where."
We're now joined by Ketchup Sports correspondent Max Walpuff to discuss more. And Max, it seems like it's all up to Commissioner Rob Manfred about what happens now. So what does that future look like, that decision look like for Commissioner Manfred?
This is going to be a difficult decision for Rob Manfred. The Players Association essentially is daring him to impose a season on the players combined with salary cuts. This has always been a fight about the money, whether how much each player would get prorated against their salary and whether it would be a 100% prorated share or some form of a concession of 80% or 70%. And the MLB and the PA agreed back in March to this deal for the decides to negotiate in good faith about how long this season would be. But this agreement said that the players would receive prorated salaries based on the number of games played. Major League Baseball fully believes that the Players Association agreed to the salaries only if fans came back, while the Players Association claims one had nothing to do with the other.
So what does this look like for not just the future of this season, but expanding this out to even further? Because at the end of next year, 2021, is when the current CBA is supposed to be up between MLB and the MLBPA. And negotiations between the two have been frosty in the past, and things don't seem great now. So what does this kind of project to past this season?
This projects to another bloody and potentially brutal fight between baseball owners and baseball players. This has been a microcosm of possibly what's to come in the 2020 offseason leading into the collective bargaining agreement. The current CBA was an 11th hour agreement, if anyone remembers back that far. And the arguments by the owners that especially the one made by Cardinals owner Bill DeWitt on a radio show, that baseball was not as profitable as a business. This was all undercut by recent reports from the New York Post of a new billion-dollar TV rights deal that baseball struck with Turner Broadcasting later in this weekend. So the current CBA expiring in 2021 offers a big arena for players and owners to battle it out again, much like they've done the last few weeks.
Well, Max, hopefully we come to a conclusion soon, and baseball fans like you and I will be able to have some kind of MLB season this year to watch. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Hope so as well.
Well, the COVID-19 pandemic has shut down many parts of the country, including many public services such as pools, parks, and libraries. One librarian in Virginia has thought of a clever way to make sure her local children were still able to continue reading free of charge: drones. Kelly Pasick, a middle school librarian in the Montgomery County School District in Christiansburg, Virginia, thought of the idea as she had seen and used some of Google's spin-off's Project Wing that delivers food and other products using drones. Pasick petitioned the company, who has been operating in Christiansburg since last October, and almost immediately signed on to help her in her mission. And now local children in Christiansburg, Virginia, will be able to receive their favorite books starting this week. Thanks for catching up on today's news with us. I'm Dan Kotnick.
And I'm Anna Herman. If you like what you heard today, make sure to tune in tomorrow. New episodes air every Monday through Friday and come out at 5 a.m. Central Time.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please give us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts.
For even more content, follow Catch Up Digital on social media. Just search for @TimeForCatchup.
We'd love to hear your thoughts on any of the stories we've covered today. Just use the hashtag #PassTheCatchup on social media.
Catch Up is an official production of Public House Media.